It occurred to me as we were just kind of rolling through these slides that, each one of us has probably had some kind of an experience where something happened that you didn't think was possible. And yet somehow it did happen. As a matter of fact, over dinner last night, I heard about a guy in Stillwater, Oklahoma, who had to get to Tulsa, and he was too late, and he knew he was too late. But it was right for him to go, and he decided he was going to go, and that he wasn't going to break the speed limit on his way. And somehow he got there on time. I've had experiences like that. I'm going to share a few of those with you. You guys have probably had experiences like that. I heard, I was up in Portland, Oregon not long ago, and there was a woman that said she had a pile of work to do, and she was in a hotel. She was away from her family. I think kind of for the first time away from her family. So she was a little sort of, just disoriented a little bit. And she had this big pile of reading she had to do. And she just felt lost. There was no way she was going to get it all done. And she decided to take a walk. That's very sort of counterintuitive, right? If you got this work to do, instead she decided she's going to take a walk. And so she went outside. I think she was in a distant city somewhere, and I think it was at a seaport, because she walked by these yachts in the harbor, and she walked by these glass storefronts, and then there was a little concert, an outdoor concert. She sat and listened to a few songs, and then she thought, well, I better get back to my work and see if I can salvage some of this evening. And but on her way back, she stopped at Starbucks and got something to drink and sat there for a few minutes. And then she went back to her hotel. But she hadn't taken her phone with her, and she hadn't taken her watch with her. And when she got back to her hotel, she realized that there was only 20 minutes that had elapsed. It gives you, and of course she was able to accomplish everything she needed to accomplish. It gives you a sense of the nature of this thing that we've called time. I don't know if you noticed, but one of those slides talked about the ancient Greeks had two words for time. One was chronos, which is what you wear on your wrist, and it goes tick, 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 and everything is equal. And the other they called kairos, which is, they called it the interval outside of time in which everything real happens. They called it the, according to the timetable of God. It's my own kind of thought, and I'm hoping to share some of this with you guys today, that we can operate free of those hard restrictions. Time is one of those things that seems very relentless, and if you allow it to kind of take control of you, it can mess things up. I have a friend who lives in Chicago, and he ran for many years a very successful manufacturing business. Now, manufacturing involves throughput. You can't fake it. You either deliver the product or you don't. And he used to run his company on a to-do list. He was the president, and he had a to-do list every day. And depending on how many of those items he got checked off his to-do list, that's how he felt about himself. And he was falling behind on his to-do list. And it was starting to affect him physically. It kind of messed with his sleep, and it messed with his ability to eat food correctly and properly. And he said at one point it was like he was pulled out of his chair and wrung out and then hurled back into his chair, kind of completely spent. And then he realized, I got to think differently about this. And what he began to try to do, and it's what I'm going to hopefully suggest to us today, is that we allow divine mind to govern our lives rather than the tick, tick, tick of the clock. The clock can't even think. The clock is a mechanism. It's useful. I wear a very accurate watch. You guys wear watches, right? I wear a very accurate watch. They get better all the time. And they're useful. And I have nothing against, as a matter of fact, this flyer has a hammer smashing the clock. I don't actually recommend you smash your clock. What I do recommend, though, is you take control of your own lives, or allow divine mind to control your life, rather than this relentless tick, tick, tick of the clock. Now, what we're really talking about today is not time management. You know, time management. Have you guys had time management seminars and stuff like that? Yeah, I've had some of those too. And they basically, that time management operates from the premise that you have a very precious, limited thing called time. And if you allow it to slip away, that's to your detriment. And that's kind of the premise. It's a limited premise. And in fact, if you remember from time management, they tell you what you've got to learn to say is no. You've got to learn how to say no. My thought on it is a little different. My thought is, don't learn to say no. Learn to say, is this mine to do? Without respect to what the clock is telling you you can do. Because if it is yours to do, you can do it. You ever heard the phrase, work expands to fill the time available? Have you ever heard that phrase? It's kind of a phenomena that somebody has noticed, and they put that label on it. Work expands to fill the time available. Well, I've noticed that time will also expand to enable what is necessary. And in fact, everything will expand to enable what is necessary. So the key question is, not what does the clock say, but is this mine to do? Now you might think that we're talking about not just time management, but maybe physics or time warps or something like that. Or you might be talking about human mind control of your life, or human will, or human discipline even. No, I'm talking about a sense of freedom, a sense of understanding the nature, the real nature of life. Life most sweet. As a matter of fact, I wanted to introduce, and I might as well just do it right now. There's a book that I'm going to be talking about, and they've got some copies at the back table that are for sale, and if you don't have one, I'd grab one actually on your way out. This is a book called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, and it was written by a woman named Mary Baker Eddy, and she used that phrase, life most sweet. And really what we're talking about is freedom or life most sweet, not life all crushed by time or crushed by any kind of mortal measurement. I mean, there are a lot of mortal measurements. There's money is a mortal measurement, physical strength is a mortal measurement, race, age, time is just one. But we're going to focus on time today. I've had some experience with it myself. Now, in physics, time is what they call a fundamental quantity. It's called a fundamental quantity. And there are 7 fundamental quantities. There used to be 4 fundamental quantities. Now there are 7. But even in physics, time is kind of a squishy thing. It's not what you think it is. It's not what they think it is. Things happen faster than is physically possible. And it's not just theoretical, it's actually observable. And they've observed it for decades. And they've tried to write, some answers to that. They've tried to understand how is this possible that things happen that can't possibly happen. Special relativity was an attempt to try to address that. There's a theory called the entanglement theory. Have you ever heard of that? Where somehow in one part of the universe there's a particle that's entangled with a particle in another part of the universe because things happen between them that could not possibly happen. Einstein ended up calling it spooky action at a distance. And in fact, I think honestly that's about where you need to leave it. I think that's all you really need to know about it. Time is a useful thing, but it is not a firm thing. It's not as firm as it seems. I found a book a couple of years ago, a guy named George Musser. He's contributing editor for Scientific American magazine. He's a physicist out of Brown University. And he wrote a book called Spooky Action at a Distance. And he said this: Albert Einstein struggled with these strange occurrences, and his description of them gives this book its title, Spooky Action at a Distance. Non-local phenomena so violate what we believe about the physical world that they appear almost magical. Okay? They violate what we've come to expect from the physical world, so much so that they seem magical. Almost like a guy getting in his car without enough time and deciding he's going to drive to Tulsa without breaking the speed limit, and he arrives there on time. It's almost like one part of the particle in the universe somehow connected with another part in the universe. It defies what we've come to expect. So much so that it appears almost magical. Now, let me share just something. You can see I've got a bunch of tabs on this book. I won't read those all to you, but I will read a few. Near the back of this book, there's a little glossary of terms. It's only 20 or 30 pages long, but it includes a lot of Bible terms, the spiritual interpretation. As a matter of fact, I'll give you this is Mary Baker Eddy's description of this glossary. She said, this contains the metaphysical interpretation of Bible terms, giving their spiritual sense, which is also their original meaning. So there's a lot of terms that explain there, and some of them are everyday words like time or like day. But the one I wanted to share with you really quick is the word miracle. Now, you guys have a view of miracle, I do too, and it's something that defies what we've come to expect, right? We don't come to expect those. They're beautiful, but they're not expected. But here's what it says, miracle, that which is divinely natural, but must be learned humanly. So this little sort of thing which defies what we've come to expect, we should learn to expect it. As a matter of fact, at dinner last night, somebody else said, learn to expect the unexpected, or learn to expect the amazing. It was something like that. Learn to expect the miracle. We should come to expect it. I wouldn't schedule it. I did a lot of scheduling when I was right out of college. I worked in a printing manufacturing operation, and I think I managed 10,000 projects, which involved schedules, while I was still in my 20s. And so I'm somewhat familiar with sort of pushing back against these hard deadlines. And I don't mean asking for more time. I mean finding a way to accomplish things that don't seem like they're possible. I got a work order more than once that just seemed undoable. You get this work order, you say, who would even write this down? And then hand it out and run away. And yet, I used to find that, let's see what we can do. I figured I had a choice. I could either say, I can't do this, or I could say, maybe I can do this. And like the guy going from Stillwater to Tulsa, I used to try. And I used to more often than not deliver. And so it made me think, well, maybe more is possible than what meets the eye. And even though it defies what we've come to expect, we can actually accomplish it if it's ours to do. Now, in metaphysics, time is a non-issue. Time is totally irrelevant. And so is space. For instance, I'm trying to think of something that you guys would know specifically, but let's just say something I know you know. If I say the words Great Wall of China, even before I get those words out, you have a mental picture of that. It's a concept. It's like a metaphysical concept. You don't have to go get yen and get an airplane schedule to fly to China to understand what that is. It's a concept. If I say Golden Gate Bridge, right? Same thing. It's just, even before I get the words out, you guys have a sense of it, because it's a metaphysical concept. It doesn't involve time. It doesn't involve space. If I say something like, your childhood home, or your mother's face, or something which you understand, it's quick. It's like that. It's immediate. And the word immediate, by the way, has to do with nothing in between, no medium. There's nothing in between. And in fact, it's got the connotation of already. It's already done. I wanted to share, I just saw this, I tabbed it, I might as well share it with you guys. This is from Science and Health. Science reveals the possibility of achieving all good and sets mortals at work. Remember we said it's learnable humanly. It sets mortals at work to discover what God has already done. But distrust of one's ability to gain the goodness desired and to bring out better and higher results often hampers the trial of one's wings and ensures failure at the outset. So how many times have you said, nope, couldn't possibly do that, not enough time? I should have started, even Yoda said that. Nope, too late to begin the training. Remember that? From Star Wars? Nope, too late to begin the training. That's you've assigned a mortal limit to what could be an amazing pursuit. And if we allow ourselves, like when I went to graduate school, I got an MBA at Babson College, which is a great college. It was perfect for me. But I was talking to a Christian Scientist, and she said, why aren't you going to Harvard? And I said, well, I don't think I could get into Harvard. She said, why are you so sure of that? Okay, we form these limits for ourselves, and then we live within those. And the possibilities of, let's say, an event like this, where we just spend an hour or so chatting about what's possible, is you might walk out of here with an idea or two that might shake things up a little and enable you to do things that you hadn't thought possible. So, if you look in the Bible for the word immediate, you won't find it in the Old Testament. I don't think you see it at all in the Old Testament. But you do find it in the New Testament. You find it 50, 60 times in the New Testament. Mostly having to do with Jesus or his disciples or Paul. And if you can think of some of those, like immediately the boat was at the shore, right? I wonder what that looked like, to the human eye. Immediately the boat was at the shore. Or immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength, right? There are references to that, which has that connotation of it's already done. It's already done. You guys know who Roger Bannister is, by any chance? He's the guy that broke the 4-minute mile back in 1953. It was a documentary. It was really a moving documentary. I'd look for it if you can, but they asked him, did you think that was a physiological barrier? Because a lot of people did at the time. He said, no, I knew it was mental. I knew someone was going to break that record. And I figured it might as well be me. He was unlimited. He had a sense of that time limit as not being real. That was a mental limit. And we can bust through those mental limits and expect the unexpected. We've become somewhat, I guess, we've come to expect less than we could and should. Okay. I pulled a few of these from the Bible, just a few little statements that relate to this topic. And this is one. Okay, so Isaiah. I don't remember exactly when Isaiah lived. Was that like 3,000 years ago? Okay. So this is Isaiah. He makes this statement. Before they call, I will answer. That sounds like already, doesn't it? That sounds like immediate. Before they call, I will answer. While they're yet speaking, I will hear. That sounds like right now. Like there is nothing, no delay in that. It's actually before. It's already. The Word of God is quick. I just pulled a few of these. I bet you we could find a bunch of these. We'd probably find 100 of these if we took some time. The Word of God is quick. How quick? Quick. Immediate. When I was a little kid, my mother told me, I might have been maybe 4 or 5 years old, and my mother told me, if you ever get in real trouble, you can reach out to God, and God will help you. And I thought, cool. I didn't make much of it, but I remember thinking, that's nice. And maybe about, within a few weeks of that, I climbed up on this dresser, might have been about shoulder high, maybe about this high. And I climbed up on this dresser and threw a pillow up there, and I was going to call my brother into the room. My older brother and I used to share a room. I was going to call him into the room, and then from this advantaged position above him, he would walk in, and I would come down on him with this pillow, right? Just rain terror into his life. And what happened was I fell. I was on my knees on this dresser, and I fell. And as I was falling, and that's extremely disconcerting to be falling backwards and looking at the ceiling, and I thought, I remember my mom told me, and this might be one of those moments. And my mom told me I could reach out to God. So I did. I said, God, you got to help me. And an idea came. By the way, God is defined in this book, among other things, as divine mind. It's divine mind. And how close is mind? It's right now. It's present. It's already present. So I reached out, you might say, to divine mind, saying, God, you got to help me. And an idea came to interlock my fingers and put my hands behind my head. So as I was falling now with my fingers like that, I came into contact with a doorknob. And my hands came right around it. And I caught it. And then my feet came down flat on the floor. The whole thing was over. Now, I don't think I ever told my mom that, but I've thought about it because that was a need, and I reached out into the divine, you might say, as a little kid, and I got an idea. I want to read something to you guys from the very, very beginning of this book. The preface, it's still in the Roman numerals. It says this: now as then, these mighty works are not supernatural. They are supremely natural. They are the sign of Emmanuel, or God with us, a divine influence ever present in human consciousness and repeating itself. So how close is God? Closer than the air you breathe. It's as close as your thought, and it's right there. It's already there. It's immediate. It's answering before you ask. Very present. God is very, very present. Ever present. Very present. You know, present has a space connotation as well as a time connotation. God is present. Present here, present now. And particularly very present in trouble. Because that, you know how they say there's no atheist in the foxhole? It's kind of like, when you got a problem, you're reaching for something. And believe me, I wasn't reaching for a doorknob. I didn't know there was a doorknob there. I was reaching for an idea, and the idea came. And it was actionable to a 4-year-old, midair. God shall help her early. Early's a time reference. You know, for some reason my mother told me that early, before I needed it. I think she was an alert young mom, and she probably saw me, you know, kind of terrorizing and doing things, and she probably realized, he's going to be somewhere and I'm not going to be there. So he's got to be ready. You ever heard the phrase, don't prepare the road for the child, prepare the child for the road? Well, she did that, and I just happened to be listening. We should be changed in a moment. You know, we're going to spend a little time here this afternoon, but if you get an idea that actually resonates, it's going to come like that. It doesn't take an hour for that to happen. It's right now. It's immediate. And you'll say, never thought of it that way. Boom, and walk out of here, and it's changed you. You can be changed in a moment. That's the way it works. Thought works right now. You know, I mentioned this book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. This one happens to be brand new. These things do get beat up. People use these every day. It's been called a textbook for life. And I recommend if you grab a copy, use it. You know, use it. Turn the pages down and mark it up and write in it and so forth. This is a textbook that can help you. It can change things for you. It's used in connection with the Bible. And as a matter of fact, if I can find it, let me read a couple of things, just a couple of little tabs, just to go through them since I took the trouble of tabbing them. If you go to one of the great divinity schools, they'll teach you 7 different interpretations of the Bible. There's like the historic, the literal, the allegorical, the symbolic, the mystical. But here's what Mary Baker Eddy says. The divine science taught in the original language of the Bible came through inspiration and needs inspiration to be understood. Let me read this. The one important interpretation of the scripture is the spiritual. So as you're looking at the Bible, or as you're studying along with a book like this, you're not actually trying to figure out what time this happened, or the literal detail. What you're actually looking for is the spiritual truth of it, because that's what remains true now. That's what remains true for you. It's true for us. It's eternally true. History changes and people rewrite it. Truth doesn't change. 2 + 2 never changes. 2 + 2 was 4 the day the first caveman started counting out sticks. 2 + 2 is 4. The truth is true. Just a word about the author, Mary Baker Eddy, because you guys kind of want to know, where does a book like this come from? Did it just kind of show up? In fact, it came out of the life of a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. She was born in New England in 1821. And she was born into, a fair amount of limitation, actually, because just think of a young girl in 1821. She can't vote. She can't even really be guaranteed an education. She can't be guaranteed to have a job. She can't own her own children. She can't even necessarily determine who she's going to marry. There's a lot of limits on a young girl at that time, particularly. And she, rather than sort of asking the world what her prospects were, she kind of defied all that. And she just sort of said, God, what do you need me to do? It's like, rather than asking the clock, what can I do? Ask God, what do you need me to do? Clock will just fall in line. And she found that that was true. And she ended up with a very solid education for a girl of her time. She ended up with her own, she authored her own books. As a matter of fact, they probably have, I know they do, they've got a little welcome packet back there if you want to grab one. And it includes some of the magazines and the newspaper that she originally founded, and they're still being published. So she ended up having a fairly large and beneficial effect on her world. As a matter of fact, I heard this recently. She lived in Concord, New Hampshire for 20 years or so, I think maybe between ages 60 and 80. And somebody recently, I think working for one of the newspapers there in Concord, they went and did a calculation of what her value was to that community in today's dollars. Turns out it's like $40 million. Her value to that community, they've calculated in today's dollars at about $40 million. I would be grateful if my neighbors said, he was a good guy, didn't cause much trouble. But in her case, she did some real good. As a matter of fact, I wanted to share this with you. I don't know if you've been to Boston, but this is the world headquarters for the Christian Science Church, and that's actually the church there, and all of these buildings have kind of been built up around that over the last 100 years or so. This happens to be one of the most beautiful public spaces in the city of Boston. It's actually it's a triangular shaped lot, and it unifies, like a lot of edges between neighborhoods become like turf zones. Well, this thing actually unifies 3 neighborhoods: the Back Bay, the South End, and the Fenway. And it's a point of unity. As a matter of fact, you can't see it in this picture, but just down below us here, there's a fountain, and kids playing that fountain all summer. It's a gathering place. So I just show this to kind of, and in fact, even this meeting here today, we wouldn't even be here today had Mary Baker Eddy not done what she had done and established, for instance, this Christian Science Board of Lectureship. And I happen to be a member, or these branch churches. And we're here together being sponsored by one of the branch churches that happens to be here in Lansing. So at any rate, that's just a little bit about the author. And if you want to know more, there are a lot of ways to learn more about Mary Baker Eddy. As I have mentioned a couple of times already, if it's yours to do, do it. Ask not, it's like John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask not what the clock tells you could do. Ask God what you should do. Ask God, is this for me? Because if it is, there's going to be a way. There's going to be a way for you to accomplish it. I had a woman that called me up. I'm a Christian Science practitioner, and I'm listed, and people will get my number and call me. And one woman called around 11 o'clock one Sunday night and said, I'm supposed to go to Mexico tomorrow. My passport is gone. I think it was stolen. It was unsecured. And I asked her one question. I said, is this trip necessary? Is this yours to do? I know you want to go. I know you bought a ticket. But is it yours to do, really? And she thought a minute and said, I think it is. I said, good, then go. And forget that passport. You've already looked everywhere for the passport. Go to Mexico. And when is your flight? I said, when is your flight? She said, it's tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, okay, at 1 o'clock tomorrow, you call me and say, Dave, everything's cool. And she kind of said, geez, man, you sound so confident. How is it that you're so certain about that? I said, I'm certain of one thing. You're going to be where you need to be. And if it's on your way to Mexico, you're going to be on your way to Mexico. And maybe 10, 15 minutes later, she called me back, and she had her passport. Now, you might say, well, that defies what we've come to expect. But it doesn't. It's divinely natural for her to be able to do what's hers to do. And not let these mortal limits keep her from it. Now, I didn't say go board a plane without a passport. I didn't say that. I said get ready to go. So it seems like magic. It wasn't magic. All she did was open her suitcase, and so she was obedient. You know, she heard what I said and did it. And in doing so, you ever heard the phrase the road will rise up and meet you? Have we? You know, it's like that. The road will rise up and meet you. You go where you need to go. And God is there waiting for you before you call. God is there. Okay, so if somebody calls you in the middle of the night looking for a passport, you're not really there to give them a passport. What you're there to do is show them a different way of looking at things. And that's why she called, and that's what she got. You know, I like this little phrase from 2 Timothy, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished. And I always thought that word, I came out of the printing business, so I assumed that was a typo. I assumed that what they meant was thoroughly, and they'll fix it next time they print it. But that word thoroughly actually shows up 6 or 7 times in the Bible, and I wanted to know what it meant. And so I did a little study on it. It actually has 2 meanings: completely equipped and utterly capable. Okay, not just equipped, but ready, capable. And the man of God, if you might think that that's somebody else, that's just us. We're that. We're God's children. The guy Tyndale, who translated the Bible into English, he said, the boy driving the plow will know more of the Bible than the Pope himself. Okay, so that's who the man of God is. It's the boy driving the plow. You know, I've ridden a lot on a motorcycle, like 130,000 miles or something like that. I've ridden a lot. And I've ridden through here, and I've ridden all over the place. Crisscrossing this country, and through Europe, and through the Maritimes, and across Canada, and done a bunch of riding. And one time I was up, frankly, I was up in the Upper Peninsula, and I was right along Lake Michigan on the north coast there. You guys have probably been on this road. And I pulled into this campground because it was kind of getting late. It might have been 7 o'clock at night or 8. And I thought, you know, that's enough. And I pulled into this campground and set up a tent. And in the morning, I got up and I made some notes, as I sometimes do. I just sat quietly by the lake. It couldn't have been more beautiful. It was a really, really sunny, bright, dry day. And I wrote this down from memory. It's something that Mary Baker Eddy wrote maybe 115, 120 years ago. Remember, thou canst be brought into no condition, be it ever so severe, where love has not been before thee. That sounds like already, doesn't it? That sounds like already. God's already there. You can't go somewhere where God is not already there. And then I hopped on my bike, packed up my gear, and headed north. I was headed for Sault Ste. Marie, and I was going to cut across Canada. I used to live in Boston. I was going to cut across Canada for the last 1,000 miles or so. But now when I got back out onto this nice little 2-lane highway that I was on the night before, it was all of a sudden a very busy artery. And like I say, you guys might know that road. I don't know the number of it. but there's a lot of traffic and a lot of trucks, and it's 70 miles an hour, and everybody is very urgent at 8 o'clock on a say a Monday morning. And there's no entry. You have to just, bang, be doing 70 miles an hour. And I was on a little curve like this, and so I looked to make sure I had an opening. And when I did, I jumped on my accelerator and headed north. But when I looked up, I realized I do not have a lane because there's a truck in my lane passing another truck. So I've got two trucks coming toward me at about 100 feet away. So 100 feet, you can do the math quickly on that. 100 feet at 70 miles an hour, that's a little less than 1 second, right? The closing interval is a little less than 1 second. So if somebody had given you a work order that said, you can have 1 second to move your motorcycle from in front of a truck traveling 70 miles an hour, you would say, no, I'm not going to do that because there's not enough time for that. But if it comes up, by the way, I can't be the only one this stuff happens to, right? But anyway, if it comes up, what I noticed during that 1 second, the first thing I noticed was from the lines painted on the road, that the driver in my lane coming toward me was there legally. He was making a legal pass. And you might say, yeah, but who cares, right? I mean, it doesn't change anything. No, just the first thing I saw. He's making a legal pass. The next thing I saw was that driver must have seen this coming before I did because he was trying to make some room. I could just see him trying to ease his truck toward the center line. Nobody honked, which I think was a big blessing because that would have introduced into that 1 second fear, right? An alarm. I didn't hear that. Nobody honked. I noticed a little tiny sliver of asphalt, maybe 18 inches wide, just outside the lane to my right, and I put my bike there. And then I raised my right hand, my left hand was on the clutch, and I raised my right hand to kind of signal to the driver, don't jackknife your truck. If you'll roll through here, I think I'll be okay. And then I noticed he was like right here where this projector is. He, by the way, how come we're not using that projector? It looks like a good one. We're using this one. But at any rate, he was about right here now, and I saw him reach across his steering wheel and kind of wave to me as he went by. And I just stayed where I was. There were a couple cars behind him making the same pass, so I had to stay where I was a little longer. All that cleared, and I rolled towards Sault Ste. Marie. But I was thinking about it. I was thinking, you know, that was severe. That couldn't have been more than 100 feet. 100 feet, that couldn't have been more than 1 second. That whole thing took place in less than a second. That was ever so severe. So I started thinking, well, what's my tender lesson then? What's my tender lesson? And it occurred to me that time can't take away your life. Time and life are two different things. Time is mortal and life is spiritual. They don't interface. We've come to believe they do. We've come to believe that the tick, tick, tick of time is timing our lives. But life is spiritual and eternal. And time is mortal. And as I rolled along, this thought came to me. This is another one of these little Bible statements about time. And I started thinking about that. I thought, one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. So I started thinking, well, I wonder what 1 second is. And I did that arithmetic. It's a little bit of a computation, but by the time you work it out, it's 4.2 days. So 1 second with the Lord is as 4.2 days, if you use that sort of spiritual equation, which of course is not a factor. Time is not a factor. If somebody came and said you're going to have 4.2 days to move your motorcycle from in front of a truck, you would say, tell me about it in a couple of days, right? I mean, it's not even an issue. You could paint the lines on the road in 4.2 days. Okay, so I started thinking about that as I was rolling forward, and I'm thinking, well, if time is not a factor, what is? What is it that enables people to do what they need to do? What is it that enables people to accomplish, to get from Stillwater to Tulsa? without having enough time to do it. How is that possible? And I was thinking about the detail of this thing. I rolled around Lake Superior a couple of years ago with my brother, and I came down. I now live in Chicago, and I came down that same road, and I wanted to find that spot. I thought, was it really 100 feet, and was it really 70 miles an hour? Because if it was, then something actually interesting happened there that day. And I found that spot, and I got off my bike, and I looked around, and I said, yeah, the lines are the way they were, the asphalt was just the way I remember it, the speed is just the way I remember it. And I was thinking about, you know, when Jesus fed the multitude, that's kind of a miracle. That everybody agrees that is kind of a miracle, because we have some detail about that, right? What are the details we have on that? Like, how many people were there? 5,000 men, plus women and children. And we know how much food they had, right? How much food did they have? Say that again. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, 3 fishes, 2 fishes. And we know that they had some leftovers. And how much did they have left over? Do you remember? They had baskets full of leftovers, 12 baskets full of leftovers. And Jesus remembered that later. Jesus said, did you guys forget about the 12 baskets? I think Jesus understood that something interesting had happened there. Without those, that's why he wanted to know. How much is, what do you have, and what's left over, and count them, and gather it. You know, he did that a couple of times. Remember, he did it, one was 4,000, one was 5,000. The numbers were similar. And then he stopped doing it. You remember why he stopped doing that? Say that again?
People followed him for food.
That's it. They were just there for the food. And he recognized that. And he said, say that again? He was more than a caterer. Yes. He was more than a caterer. What enabled him to accomplish that, though? That's a miracle. And we have the detail. I mean, if we didn't have that detail, we would have just thought, well, somehow everybody ate. It was a cool thing, and it was a great, you know, nice time on the hillside. But how did he accomplish that? First of all, they followed him, right? They followed him. He did not say, you should join me on the hillside. I think he was trying to get away. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was trying to get away. And they said, the Bible says, they were as sheep not having a shepherd. He had compassion on them, and he taught them many things. And it got to be dinner time. Was it dinner time or was it lunch? Do you think? Say that again? Some of each? You think it was different times? I think it was at the end of the day. I think it was at the end of the day. And he said, let's feed these people. We're not going to send them home hungry. Why would you not send them home hungry? Because it's impolite. It's dinner time. It's dinner time. And they said, we can't do it. He said, why? We don't have. We don't have enough. We don't have enough. And he said, what do you have? The question is, what do you already have? He didn't say, man, you're right. We should have thought of that. How do we get ourselves into this fix? He didn't say that. He said, what do you have? And they said, well, they belittled it. All we have is 5 loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many? And you remember what he did? He said, bring that to me. Bring that to me. And which brings us to this answer. What is the factor? The factor is the Christ. And this Science and Health makes an interesting distinction between Jesus, the man who did all this stuff, and the Christ, which he embodied so perfectly. And even Jesus left us free to do the same. I mean, he didn't take students in order to glorify himself. He took students to teach so that they could do it. And they did do it. Let me read just a couple of these. I've got them tabbed up. We might as well. Jesus is the name of the man who more than all other men has presented Christ, the true idea of God. Jesus is the human man, and Christ is the divine idea. Here's another one. The word Christ is not properly a synonym for Jesus, though it is commonly so used. Christ expresses God's spiritual, eternal nature. Jesus was born of Mary. Christ is the true idea voicing good, the divine message from God to men speaking to the human consciousness. If we think that we are out of touch with God, or that God doesn't talk to us, or we can't hear, this is the Christ speaking to the human consciousness. And all we really have to do is say, I'm sure I can hear that if I listen. I'm sure I can. I know it's present. Now, I threw this slide in just as a little kind of an illustration. If you think of the Christ truth, this eternal Christ truth as that white light, pure and perfect, and you think of that prism as like the human consciousness, what you have is the Christ entering human consciousness, ever present in human consciousness, and exploding into ideas, useful, harmonious, actionable, productive, saving, resurrecting ideas. But again, we're not talking about light. Light travels at the speed of light. We're talking about mind, which travels immediately. If you think you need more time, no, you don't need more time. What we need is a better idea. Ideas will always trump time. Like, it wasn't a couple of days ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I hopped on the airplane in Tampa at 6:30 in the morning, and by 8 o'clock I was receiving phone calls in Chicago. So I'm in business in Chicago by 8 a.m. Now there was a time change in there, but that's still pretty amazing to be able to in an hour and a half, be able to be back in business. So how is it that that's possible? 100 years ago, that would have taken a month. Now it takes a little over an hour. It's because we've had a succession of ideas, better and better and better ideas. And every time you have these better ideas, time goes away, time goes away. And even these cell phones now. I mean, we used to have to, walk to where we had to meet somebody. And then pretty soon you had to walk to a payphone. And now you just carry it in your pocket or on your wrist. I have a friend who's an architect, and he was supposed to deliver an architectural model, and he was late. And so late, by the way, that it was affecting him. It was affecting his sleep, and it was affecting his eating. And he wanted to put in the afternoon on this project, but his wife said, "Oh, we're having some people over for lunch." So he went to lunch, and over lunch he sneezed. And there was a little girl there, maybe 10 years old, something like that. And she said, "God bless you." And it just he just caught his attention. This little girl sees this sneeze, calls for this blessing, and suddenly he got an idea. And the idea was, you don't have to paint those pieces with a brush, you can spray paint those pieces. You ever done any spray painting, by the way? It's way, way, way fast. And he turned his project in early. He had more than enough time. So he did not ask for an extension. He paused and was a good host. And over lunch, he got an idea. And the idea just took the time. This might be maybe the most important thing that we're going to say all day today. And it's this concept that the truth is timeless. The 2 + 2 is 4. That which has ever been true is still true. I burned myself. I burned my hand one time. I burned up 3 fingers. And I was just sad and dejected and mad that I'd allowed this to happen. And it hurt like crazy. I'm standing there, my hand is throbbing, can hardly think. And I was standing there and I thought, 2,500 years ago, there were 3 guys that went into this furnace. And somehow they weren't hurt by that. Somehow they understood something about life that made them free from that heat. And that the heat had no effect on their flesh. And I thought, whatever it was they knew is still true. Okay? So that was 2,500 years ago, but it's still true. Whatever the truth is about it, still true. Which means it's true for me. And I can tell you that the next morning when I went to get in the shower, And I thought, this is gonna hurt. I'm gonna put this hand under that hot water and it's gonna hurt. But it didn't hurt at all. And then I noticed the hand was perfect, like perfect. Now Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Well, I would urge you to know that there is a truth. I would start there. There is a truth. There's a truth that relates to this, and it's still true for me. And anyone who's ever proven it ever simply proves that it's there for us, and it includes us. You know, I have a friend, actually, who lives here in Michigan, and she was unable to walk for around 10 years. And one day she was reading this book, Science and Health, and it was almost like a little whisper, like this divine presence in human consciousness. It was like this little whisper came to her. It came to her, this is true for you. And she was up, and that was it. She recently sailed her sailboat from the Atlantic Ocean into Lake Michigan. So, I mean, she's got full use of everything. So anyway, this idea that the truth is timeless is a very helpful concept. Truth doesn't depend on time. And then the idea that time heals, you've all heard that time heals all wounds. Time doesn't heal. Time can't do anything, really. And I'll bet you everyone here knows somebody who got stabbed or betrayed or something by somebody somewhere along the line, and they've had trouble getting rid of it. Time in and of itself does not do that. If time healed, we wouldn't have anything called chronic illness or chronic injury, because chronic just means over time. So time is not a healer, but what does heal is thought. You allow your thought to change. I used to sprain my ankles like all the time, and I used to tape them up, and I'd wear sleeves on them. I used to use pump up basketball shoes. You've seen those things that stabilize your ankle. And one night I was playing platform tennis. You guys play platform tennis around here? You play it outdoor. It's a winter game. Play it outside. Have to shovel the court up. Anyway, I was playing and I sprained an ankle. And I taped it up with some duct tape. And I went back out to play, but the ankle was weak and kind of worthless. And I finished that night, but then I took some time off, and I ended up taking 6 weeks off, which is a long time, you know, for a guy that likes to play 2 or 3 times a week. It's taking 6 weeks off is a long time. And what happened was I was walking my dogs in the woods, and I sprained that ankle again. And I thought, I stopped, and I couldn't even walk. So now I'm standing on one foot in the woods, 2 dogs running ahead of me, and I thought, time and rest are not making that ankle stronger. If anything, it's getting weaker. You're spraining it over nothing now. You're walking your dogs. You sprain your ankle to the point you can't even walk. You have to think differently. I thought, okay, I'll do that. And then it came to me, you got to think radically differently. I thought, okay, I will do that. What is the radical thought? And it came to me, the original accident never happened. Well, that's pretty radical. That's very radical. I'm standing on one foot. I've been nursing this weak ankle really all my life, but certainly for the last 6 weeks. So this concept, the original accident never happened, that went way, way deep. But I was willing to accept it. And I might have even said it out loud. I was just there by myself in the woods. I said, okay, I accept. The original accident never happened. Now what? Because I'm still standing on one foot. So I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop, right? Well, what came to me was, you better be careful walking out of here, though, because there's ice and snow and all kinds of stuff on the path. And horse hoof prints and all kinds of hazards. And that's when it caught me. I thought, hold it. If it had never happened, if I had never been injured, would I be careful? I thought, no, I wouldn't. And I'm not going to. And I began to walk. Boom. It was the moment the foot hit the ground, it was like immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. It was like that. And I walked out of there and I thought, look at that ankle, stronger than it's ever been. It's stronger than the other ankle. It's stronger than it was when I was a kid. So when you say the original accident never happened, which accident are we talking about? The one that happened just now, or the one that happened 6 weeks ago, or the one that happened 60 years ago, or the one that happened 60,000 years ago, when the first caveman rolled the first ankle? When you say it never happened, it never happened. And in this book, by the way, Science and Health, there's a statement in here somewhere that says accidents are unknown to God. Well, if accidents are unknown to God, then they're certainly unknown to his children. Why should we know something that God doesn't know? Anyway, I've been walking on that ankle ever since, and I've been playing on it, and I've never taped it. I played that very night, never taped it, never even thought about it. And I ran and jumped and did all the pushing and pivoting and all the stuff you do in a game of tennis. And I've never sprained it since, and I've never taped it. Just think what I say on tape. Time doesn't heal. Thought heals. Let your thought change. Don't cling to the idea, I can't. Cling to the idea, maybe I can. If it's mine to do, maybe I can. I can tell you some more stories like that, but in the interest of time, I won't. The world loves to know your age. It wants to know your age every time you turn around. It's a convenient kind of categorization tool. And I don't recommend you lie about that, but I think you want to identify yourself to yourself differently. Think of yourself as a spiritual idea, throughly furnished, timeless, capable, able, ageless, rather than I'm doing pretty good for someone my age. Or I'm hoping to keep doing this for a couple more years. No, you think of yourself in terms of spiritual qualities rather than demographic qualities. Like I could easily describe myself as a white dude of a certain age, live in a certain zip code, got a certain education, and make a certain amount of money. I could define myself demographically. I have certain interests. I like certain teams. Those are kind of demographics. But if you define yourself spiritually, it's totally free of time, totally free of that. And I recommend you do it. It's the freedom accrues to you. You're the one that becomes free. You know, I want to read something to you from Science and Health. And you might say, oh yeah, but that book was written 150 years ago. But the truth doesn't change, right? The truth is true is true. Here's what it says. The measurement of life by solar years robs youth and gives ugliness to age. Never record ages. How often? Never record ages. Chronological data are no part of the vast forever. It's kind of like me finding on the road that time and life are two different things. Time is mortal. Life is spiritual. Life is eternal. Timetables of birth and death are so many conspiracies against manhood and womanhood. You know, life's tough enough without conspiracies. And particularly when you're entering into them of your own volition. Stay out of it. Just, if somebody asks you your age, you know, people have these snappy responses like, have you got one of those? Somebody tell me one? Yeah.
Old enough to know better.
Old enough to know better. Somebody said, I don't care if you know, but I certainly don't want to know. Somebody said, that's none of my business. I think it was one of these TV hosts used to say, I'm fine, how are you? You know, they ask her age, I'm fine, how are you? I would say, just stay out of it for yourself. Don't start identifying yourself by years. Identify yourself by the good you do. As a matter of fact, this is kind of a slide, and you know, we're going to kind of wrap this thing up here in a minute or two because you got things to do, right? We don't need to be here all day. There's a reading list, and they've got a couple copies here. You can download it, you can sign up for it if you want. It's just a reading list that I've collected on this topic. Articles and quotes and different things. And one of them is an article called High Stakes Project Led by Prayer. And this woman was running this project. There was a lot of moving parts, a lot of money involved, a lot of stakeholders. Everybody wanted to know how she was doing. And she was doing fine. She was managing this thing beautifully. Until somebody threw a curve and that sometimes happens, where they'll say, oh, by the way, we also need this. And all of a sudden she realized, this thing's coming apart. I'm not going to get this done. And she was on this stairway to go and talk to her boss about it. And on the stairs, she got an idea. And believe it or not, interestingly, coincidentally, that idea was, we already have that. What she needed was $50,000 worth of computing power that she didn't have. And on the stairs, she realized, oh, we do have it. We do have that. It's kind of like this statement that we already read here. Science reveals the possibility of achieving all good and sets mortals at work to discover what God has already done. If you want your life to expand and to be more and more and more, be attentive to what you already have. Magnify the good you already have. Anyway, that's on that reading list. And then maybe finally, I can just kind of wrap this up with this slide. This is from an article called The New Birth. Mary Baker Eddy wrote this article many years ago. It was published in one of the early issues of the Christian Science Journal back in 1880 something. And she says the new birth is not the work of a moment, but it begins with moments, goes on with years. Moments of what? Does it say learn how to split the atom? No. It says surrender to God. You're supposed to go to Mexico? Are you supposed to do this? Do it. If it's yours to do, you can do it. Moments of surrender to God. Moments of childlike trust. I know we can accomplish this. I know we can. We already have it. It's like Caleb who went and scouted out the promised land for Moses. He said, we're well able to possess this. Moments of childlike trust. Joyful adoption of good. Moments of self-abnegation. You know what that means? Self-abnegation? You got a sense of that? Because it's kind of a theme in this book, Science and Health. And it relates to like unselfishness, selflessness, unselfed love, or like the golden rule, like finding your own and another's good. I'll give you a real quick example. I one time was playing, just shooting some baskets in a gym north of Chicago, and I took my coat off and laid it on the floor. I figured I'd just keep my eye on it. But about a minute later, I noticed my coat was gone, and I couldn't believe it. You know, I just laid it down. I figured it's got to be here somewhere, so I'm starting to run around now looking for my coat. And I went to this doorway to go outside. I figured I'll look outside. Maybe somebody's leaving with it. And I got to this door, and there were three guys coming up the stairs to this doorway. I was at a landing. And the thought came to me, normally you would hold the door. You know, being a gentleman, normally you would hold this door. But because you're in this big rush now, this big urgent thing looking for your coat, you're not holding the door. You're going to go outside and look for your coat. And then I caught myself, and it might have been a moment of self-abnegation. I thought, has it really come to that now where I can't even hold the door? And I thought, you know what? I may never see that coat again, but I'm going to hold this door, and that's where I'm going to stand. And one of these three guys was wearing my coat, and I was able to retrieve it very simply. And you know, I'm not that speedy, fleet of foot. Outside, I might not have ever caught that guy. But when he brought it right to me like that. So self-abnegation ends up being a blessing to you. And I ended up walking out of there wearing my coat. Self-consecration, heaven-born hope, and spiritual love. So just quickly to recap what we've been talking about. We've been talking about the truth. This is not Scientology. This is not human mind control. This is not time management or physics. This is divine love, divine life, divine mind, divine life, enabling us to do whatever it is, the greatest unlimited sense of who we are. The Bible contains it. The Bible is full of that if you look for the truth rather than for the literal history of it. Science and Health also explains it. Again, they have some copies here. If you don't have them, they have them for sale. In metaphysics, time disappears. In physics, it's what they call a fundamental thing, problematic, but still fundamental. But in metaphysics, it's totally irrelevant. And if it's yours to do, do it. Don't let the clock tell you what you can and can't do. Don't let your wallet tell you what you can and can't do. I mean, if you're truly furnished, you're going to have everything that you need. If it's necessary, it's possible. And it's the Christ that enables that. That Christ, which is not equivalent to Jesus, it's distinct. Jesus embodied it, and so can we. He even said that himself. He said, believe on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do. If it's ever been true, it's still true. The truth doesn't come and go. And then time doesn't heal, ideas heal. Let the ideas come. An idea, a better idea will always reduce the time involved. Be as deliberately ageless as you can. And by the way, a guy called me yesterday. He's a lawyer. He's young, but kind of very successful. And he said, I can do a lot, and I don't need a lot of time to do it. But what I need to know, I need to be able to focus so I can do it quick. Well, that's kind of the way we all want to live, right? Accomplish a lot quickly. Be deliberately ageless, and then let your immortal measurements be the good that you do. Do a lot of good. If you show up for work and punch a clock, great. But if you show up and do some good, like think and deliver problem solving, now you've done something. Like the woman on the stairs there, she never got to her boss. She understands. She got an idea and understood we already have that. She solved that problem. She didn't go deliver a problem to her boss. And then our moments belong to God. Now, as I mentioned, this is being sponsored by First Church here in Greater Lansing, and they have Sunday services and Wednesday services. You're always going to be welcome there. They also have, you can see where it is right over there, just a few minutes from here. And also, yeah, that's what it looks like from the street. They also have a Christian Science reading room right there that's open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from noon to 4, Wednesday from noon to 7:30. And then the first Saturday, they've got some summer hours that will be coming up soon. But that's the reading room. And in fact, if you want to go there, you can ask some more questions or pick up whatever you need. So this is like just a little intro. There are other churches around too. That's just a few in the immediate vicinity here. And also there's some online resources, including the website for this church, and then christianscience.com, which will give you links to anything going on anywhere in the world. Also, if you do want to just download that reading list, you can do it from my own website.